Richard, are you afraid of magic? He thought carefully before answering. I was always fascinated by it. It sounded exciting, but now I know there is magic to fear. But I would guess it's like people. Some you stay clear of, and some you are fortunate to know. Kalen smiled, apparently satisfied with his answer. Richard, before I can sleep, there is something I must tend to. It is a creature of magic. If you would not be afraid, I will let you see it. The opportunity is a rare one. Few have ever seen it, and few ever will. But you must promise me you will leave and take a walk when I ask, and not ask me any more questions when you return. I am very tired and must sleep. Richard smiled at the honor. Promise. Opening her waist pouch once more, Kalen withdrew a small round bottle with a stopper. Blue and silver lines spiraled around the fat part. There was light inside. Her green eyes came to his. The creature is a night wisp. Her name is Shar. A night wisp cannot be seen in the day, only at night. Shar is part of the magic that helped me cross the boundary. She was my guide. Without her, I would have been lost. Kalen's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady and calm. Tonight she dies. She can live no longer away from her home place and the others of her kind, and she does not have the strength to cross the boundary again. Shar has sacrificed her life to help me because if Darken Rahl succeeds, all her kind, among others, will perish. Pulling the stopper free, Kalen placed the little bottle in the flat of her palm and held it out between them. A tiny flare of light lifted clear of the bottle, floating up into the cool, dim air of the wayward pine, giving everything a silvery cast. The light softened as the wisp came to a stop in the air between them, hovering. Richard was astonished. His mouth hung open as he watched, transfixed. "Good evening, Richard Cypher," it said in a tiny little voice. "Good evening to you, Shar." His own voice was not much more than a whisper. "Thank you for helping Kalen today. In so doing, you are also helping my kind. If you ever need the help of the night wisps, say my name and they will help you, for no enemy may know it." "Thank you, Shar. But the Midlands are the last place I would want to go. I'll help Kalen find the wizard, but then I must take us west and get us safely away from those who would kill us." The night wisp seemed to turn in the air for a time, considering. The silvery light felt warm and safe on his face. "If that is what you wish, then you must do so," Shar said. Richard felt relieved. The tiny point of light spun in the air before them again. Shar spun to a stop. "But know this, Darken Rahl hunts you both. He will not rest. He will not stop. If you run, he will find you, there is no doubt of that. You have no defense against him. He will kill you both soon." Richard's mouth was so dry he could hardly swallow. At least the Gar would have been quick, he thought, and then it would be over. "Shar, isn't there a way for us to escape?" The light spun again, making flashes on his face and the branches of the wayward pine. Shar stopped again. "If your back is to him, your eyes will not be. He will get you. He enjoys it." Richard stared. "But is there nothing we can do?" The tiny point of light spun again, coming closer to him this time before stopping. "Better question, Richard Cypher. The answer you want is within yourself. You must seek it. You must seek it, or he will kill you both soon." "How soon?" His voice turned harder. He couldn't help himself. The light backed away a little as it spun. He would not let this opportunity go without finding out at least something he could hold on to. The night wisp stopped. "The first day of winter, Richard Cypher, when the sun is in the sky. If Darken Rahl does not kill you before then, and if he is not stopped, then on the first day of winter, when the sun is in the sky, my kind will all die. You both will die. He will enjoy it." Richard tried to decide the best way to question a spinning point of light. "Shar." Kaelin is trying to save the others of your kind. I am trying to help her. You are giving your life to help her. If we fail, everyone dies. You just said so. Please, is there anything you can tell me to help us against Darken Rahl? The light spun and went in a little circle around the inside of the wayward pine, bringing light to the areas it went near. It stopped again in front of him.
Already told you the answer. It is in you. Seek it or die. Sorry, Richard Cypher. Want to help, don't know the answer. Just that it is in you. Sorry. Sorry.
Richard nodded, running his fingers through his hair. He didn't know who was more frustrated, Shar or himself. Glancing over, he saw Kaelin sitting calmly, watching the Night Wisp. Shar spun and waited. All right. Can you tell me why he's trying to kill me? Is it because I helped Kaelin, or is there another reason? Shar came close.
Other reasons? Secrets?
What? Richard jumped to his feet. The Night Wisp followed him up.
Don't know why. Sorry, just that he will.
What's the wizard's name?
Good question, Richard Cypher. Sorry, don't know.
Richard sat back down and put his face in his hands. Shar spun, throwing off shafts of light, and flew in slow circles around his head. Somehow, he knew she was trying to comfort him, and that she was near her end. She was dying, and she was trying to comfort him. He tried to swallow back the lump in his throat so he could talk. Shar, thank you for helping Kaelin. My life, as short as it seems it will be, has already been made longer because she saved me from doing something foolish today. My life is also better for knowing her. Thank you for helping bring my friend safely through the boundary. His vision turned watery. The Night Wisp floated to him and touched against his forehead. Her voice seemed to be as much in his head as in his ears.
I am sorry, Richard Cypher. I do not know the answers that would save you. If I did, please believe I would give them eagerly. But I know the good in you. I believe in you. I do know that you have within you what you must to succeed. There will be times when you doubt yourself. Do not give up. Remember then that I believe in you, that I know you can accomplish what you must. You are a rare person, Richard Cypher. Believe in yourself and protect Kaelin.
He realized his eyes were closed. Tears were running down freely, and the lump in his throat kept catching his breath.
There are no Gars about. Please let me be alone with Kaelin now. My time comes.
Richard nodded. Goodbye, Shar. It has been my deep honor to have known you. He left without looking at either of them. After he was gone, the Night Wisp floated to Kaelin and addressed her properly.
Mother Confessor, my time passes soon. Why have you not told him what you are?
Kaelin's shoulders were slumped, and her hands nested in her lap as she stared into the fire. Shar, I cannot, not yet.
Confessor Kaelin, that is not fair. Richard Cypher is your friend.
Tears began rolling down her face. Don't you see? That is why I cannot tell him. If I tell him, he will no longer be my friend, will no longer care for me. You cannot know what it is like to be a confessor, to have everyone fear you. He looks into my eyes, Shar. Not many have ever dared that. No one could ever look into me the way he does. His eyes make me feel safe. He makes my heart smile.
Others might tell him before you do, Confessor Kaelin. That would be worse.
She looked up at the Night Wisp, her eyes wet. I will tell him before that happens.
You play a dangerous game, Confessor Kaelin,
Shar warned.
He could fall in love with you first, then your telling would hurt him unforgivably.
I won't let that happen.
You will choose him?
No! The Night Wisp spun back at the sound of Kaelin's shriek, then slowly came back by her face.
Confessor Kaelin, you are the last of your kind. Darken Rahl has killed all the others, even your sister Denis. You are the Mother Confessor. You must choose a mate.
I could not do that to someone I cared for. No confessor would, she sobbed.
Sorry, Mother Confessor. It is for you to choose.
Kaelin pulled her legs up, wrapped her arms around them, and rested her forehead against her knees. Her shoulders heaved as she cried, her thick hair cascading down to encircle her. Shar flew slowly around her head, throwing off shafts of silvery light, comforting her companion. She continued to circle until Kaelin's weeping slowed and finally stopped. When it did, Shar returned to hover in front of her.
Hard to be Mother Confessor. Sorry.
Hard, Kaelin agreed.
Much on your shoulders.
Much, Kaelin agreed again. The night wisp landed lightly on the woman's shoulder and rested there quietly while Kaelin watched the fire glow with small, slow flames. After a time, the night wisp rose from her shoulder and floated to a spot in the air in front of her.
Wish to stay with you more. Good times. Wish to stay with Richard Seifrar. Asks good questions. But I cannot hold on longer. Sorry, I die.
You have my word, Shar, that I will give my own life if necessary to stop Dark and Rahl, to save your kind and the others.
I believe in you, Confessor Kaelin. Help Richard.
Shar came closer.
Please, before I die, touch me.
Kaelin pushed herself away from the wisp until her back was against the trunk of the tree. No, please, no, she implored, shaking her head. Don't ask me to do that. Her eyes filled with tears again. She put her trembling fingers to her lips, trying to hold back the crying. Shar came forward.
Please, Mother Confessor. I feel such pain of aloneness away from the others. I will never share their company again. It hurts so. I pass now. Please use your power. Touch me and let me drink in the sweet agony. Let me die with the taste of love. I have forfeited my life to help you. I have asked nothing else of you. Please.
Shar's light was growing dimmer, fainter. Kaelin, crying, held her left hand over her mouth. At last, she reached out with her right hand until her trembling fingers touched the wisp. All about there was thunder, but no sound. The violent impact to the air jolted the wayward pine, causing a rain of dead needles, some flaring when they touched the fire. Shar's dim silvery color changed to a pink glow, growing in intensity. Shar's voice was faint.
Thank you, Kaelin. Goodbye, my love.
The spark of light and life faded and was gone. After the thunder without sound, Richard waited for a time before he returned to her. Kaelin sat with her arms around her legs and her chin resting on her knees as she stared into the fire. Shar? He asked.
She is gone,
came the answer in a distant voice. He nodded, and taking her arm, led her to the mat of dry grass and laid her down. She went without resistance or comment. He put the blanket over her and piled on some of the dry grass to help her keep warm through the night, then burrowed himself into it next to her. Kaelin turned on her side, away from him, and pushed her shoulders back against him the way a child would put its back to a parent when peril approached. He sensed it, too. Something was coming for them. Something deadly. Already she was asleep. He knew he should feel cold, but he didn't. His hand throbbed. He felt warm. Richard lay there, thinking about the thunder without sound. He wondered what she would do to make the great wizard do what she wanted. The idea frightened him. Before he could worry more, he, too, was asleep. Chapter 6. By noon the next day, Richard knew the bite of the vine was bringing on a fever. He had no appetite. At times he was unbearably hot, sweat making his clothes stick to his skin, then he would shiver with chills. His head pounded in a way that made him sick to his stomach. There was nothing he could do about it except seek Zed's help, and since they were nearly there, he decided not to tell Kaelin. Dreams had troubled his sleep. Whether from the fever or the things he had learned, he didn't know. What Shar had told him was the most disturbing. Seek the answer or die. The sky was thinly overcast, the cold gray light foretelling the coming of winter. Trees grown large and close held back the breeze and its chill, making the trail a quiet sanctuary filled with the aromatic fragrance of balsam fir, a refuge from winter's breath above. Crossing a small brook near a beaver pond, they came upon a patch of late wildflowers, their yellow and pale blue blossoms blanketing the ground in a sparsely wooded hollow. Kaelin stopped to pick some. Finding a scoop-shaped piece of dead wood, she started arranging the flowers within the hollow of the wood. Richard thought she must be hungry. He found an apple tree he knew to be nearby, and filled his pack half full while she bent to her task. It was always a good idea to bring food when going to see Zed. Richard finished before Kaelin and waited, leaning against a log, wondering what she was doing. When she was satisfied with the arrangement, she lifted the hem of her dress and knelt beside the pond, floating the wood out onto the water. She sat back on her boots with her hands folded in her lap, watching for a time as the small raft of flowers drifted out onto the quiet water. When she turned and saw him leaning against the log, she stood and joined him. "An offering to the spirits of our two mothers," she explained, "to ask their protection and help in finding the wizard." Kaelin looked to his face, and concern came over her features. "Richard, what's wrong?" He held out an apple. "Nothing. Here, eat this." She slapped his hand away, and in a blink had him by the throat with her other hand. Anger flared in her green eyes. "Why would you do this?" she demanded. Shock raced through his mind. He went rigid. Something told him not to move. "Don't you like apples?" "I'm sorry, I'll find you something else to eat." The fury in her eyes faltered, changing to doubt. "What did you call them?" "Apples," he said, still not moving. "Don't you know what apples are? They're good to eat, I promise. What did you think they were?" Her hand loosened its grip a little. "You eat these apples?" Richard kept himself still. "Yes, all the time." Embarrassment replacing her anger, she released his throat and put her fingers over her mouth. Her eyes were wide. "Richard, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you could eat these things. In the Midlands, any red fruit is deadly poison. I thought you meant to poison me." Richard laughed as the tension went out in a rush. Kaelin laughed too, while protesting that it wasn't funny. He took a bite to show her, then offered her another. This time she took it, but looked at it long and hard before taking a bite. These things are good to eat." Kaelin's brow wrinkled. She put her hand on his forehead. "I thought there was something wrong. You are burning with fever." "I know, but there's nothing we can do until we get to Zed's. We're almost there." Zed's squat house came into sight a short distance farther up the trail. A single plank from the sod-covered roof served as a ramp for his old cat, who was better at getting up than down. White lace curtains hung on the inside of the windows, flower boxes on the outside. The flowers had dried and wilted with the passing of the season. The log walls were dull gray with age, but a bright blue door greeted visitors. Other than the door, the whole place gave the appearance of hunkering into the grasses surrounding it, of trying to go unnoticed. The house wasn't large, but it did have a porch running the length of the front. Zed's reason chair was empty. The reason chair was where Zed sat and thought until he figured out the reason for whatever it was that had snagged his curiosity. He had once sat in the chair for 3 days straight, trying to figure out why people were always arguing over how many stars there were. He himself didn't care. He thought the question trivial, and he only wondered why people spent so much time debating the subject. At last he had stood and pronounced that it was because anyone could express his profound conviction on the subject without fear of being proven wrong, as it was impossible to know the answer. Such fools simply didn't have to worry about contradiction when proclaiming expertise. Having settled the matter, Zed then went in the house and ate in earnest for 3 solid hours. Richard called out but received no answer. He smiled at Kaelin. "I bet I know where he is. Out back on his cloud rock, studying the latest batch of clouds." Cloud Rock? Kalen asked. It's his favorite place to stand and watch clouds. Don't ask me why. Ever since I've known him, whenever he sees an interesting cloud, he runs out back to watch it while standing on that rock. Richard had grown up with the rock, and didn't think the behavior peculiar. It was just part of the old man. The two of them walked through the tall, wild grasses that surrounded the house, and up a rise to the top of a small barren hill where the Cloud Rock sat. Zed was standing on the flat Cloud Rock with his arched back to them, his spindly arms outstretched, and his wavy white hair hanging away from his head as it tilted back in scrutiny. Zed was stark naked. Richard rolled his eyes. Kalen averted hers. Pale, leathery skin draped loosely over a collection of bony projections made him look as frail as a dry stick. Richard knew him to be anything but frail, though. His bottom lacked any padding whatsoever, leaving the skin there to droop. One scrawny finger rose, pointing skyward. "I knew you were coming, Richard." His voice was as thin as the rest of him. The pale, unadorned robes that were his only clothes lay in a heap behind him. Richard bent and picked them up while Kalen, smiling, turned around to avoid any further embarrassment. "Zed, we have company. Put on your clothes." "Do you know how I knew you were coming?" Still he did not move or turn. "I would say it has something to do with a cloud that has been following me for the last few days. Here, let me help get this on you." Zed spun around, arms flailing in excitement. "Days? Bags, Richard, that cloud has been following you for 3 weeks, ever since your father was killed. I haven't seen you since George's death. Where have you been? I've been looking all over for you. I can find a lost bug in a barn easier than I can find you when you get it in your head not to be found." "I've been busy. Hold your arms up so I can help you put this on." Richard shoved the robes over Zed's outstretched arms and helped pull the folds down the bony body while the old man shrugged his way into the outfit. "Busy? Too busy to look up once in a while? Bags, Richard, do you know where that cloud is from?" Zed's eyes were wide with concern as his forehead wrinkled above his raised brow. "Don't curse," Richard said. "And I would say the cloud is from Dahara." Zed's arms shot back into the air. "Dahara! Yes, very good, my boy. Tell me, what gave it away for you? Was it the texture, the density?" Zed was becoming even more excited as he wiggled around in his robe, dissatisfied with the way it twisted. "Neither. It's an assumption I make based on independent information. Zed, as I said before, we have company." Yes, I heard you the first time." He waved the matter away with his hand. "Independent information, you say?" He drew his forefinger and thumb down his smooth jaw. His hazel eyes lit up. "That's very good, too. Very good indeed. Did this information also tell you this is bad business?" "Well, yes, of course it did," he said, in answer to his own question. "Why are you sweating?" He put his twig-like fingers to Richard's forehead. "You have a fever," he pronounced. "Did you bring me anything to eat?" Richard already had an apple at hand. He knew Zed would be hungry. Zed was always hungry. The old man bit into the apple with a vengeance. "Zed, please listen to me. I'm in trouble and I need your help." Zed put his scrawny fingers on the top of Richard's head while he chewed, and with his thumb lifted an eyelid. Leaning forward, he thrust his sharply featured face close to Richard's and peered into his eye, then repeated the procedure on the other eye. "I always listen to you, Richard." He lifted Richard's arm by the wrist, feeling his pulse. "And I agree you are in trouble. In 3 hours, maybe 4, no more, you will be unconscious." Richard was taken aback. Kalen looked worried, too. Zed knew about fevers, among other things, and did not make precise pronouncements like this that ever proved in error. Richard's legs had felt weak since he awoke with chills, and he knew he was getting worse. "Can you do anything to help?" "Probably, but it depends on what caused it. Now stop being rude and introduce me to your girlfriend." "Zed, this is my friend, Kalen Amnell." The old man peered closely into his eyes.
Oh, was I wrong? She is not a girl, then? Zed cackled. He smiled over the trick as he shuffled to Kaelin, bowed dramatically at the waist, lifted her hand only a little, kissed it lightly, and said, Zedicus Zul Zorander, humbly at your whim, my dear young lady. He straightened himself up to have a look at her face. When their eyes met, his smile evaporated, and his eyes went wide. His keen features transformed to anger. He released her hand as if he had discovered himself holding a poisonous snake. Zed spun to Richard. What are you doing with this creature? Kaelin was calm and impassive. Richard was aghast. Zed, has she touched you? Well, Richard was trying to remember the times she had touched him, when Zed cut him off again. No, of course not. I can see she hasn't. Richard, do you know what she is? He turned to her. She's a... Kaelin gave Zed a look of such cold danger that it froze him in place. Richard kept his voice calm but firmly. I know exactly what she is. She is my friend. A friend who yesterday saved me from getting killed as my father was, and again saved me from being killed by some beast called a Gar. Kaelin's expression relaxed. The old man stared at her a little longer before turning to Richard. Zed, Kaelin is my friend. We are both in a lot of trouble and need to help each other. Zed stood in silence, searching Richard's eyes. He nodded. Trouble indeed. Zed, we need your help. Please? Kaelin came and stood next to him. We don't have much time. Zed didn't look inclined to be any part of it, but Richard went on anyway, watching Zed's eyes. Yesterday, after I found her, she was attacked by a quad. Another will come soon. He saw what he was looking for, a quick flash of hatred, softening into empathy. Zed looked to Kaelin as if seeing her for the first time. They faced each other for a long while. At the mention of the quad, the look on Kaelin's face became one of torment. Zed came forward and put his spindly arms around her protectively, holding her head to his shoulder. She reached around and embraced him gratefully, burying her face in his robes to conceal her tears. It's all right, dear one. You are safe here, he said softly. Let's go down to the house, and you can tell me of this trouble, and then we must tend to Richard's fever. She nodded against his shoulder. Kaelin parted from him. Zedicus Zul Zorander. I have never heard such a name. He smiled proudly, his thin lips pushing back his cheeks into deep wrinkles. I'm sure you haven't, dear one. I'm sure you haven't. By the way, can you cook? He put his arm around her shoulder, holding her tight as he started walking her down the hill. I'm hungry and haven't had a suitably cooked meal in years. He glanced back. Come along, Richard, while you still can. If you help Richard's fever, I will make you a big pot of spice soup, she offered. Spice soup? Zed swooned. I haven't had a proper spice soup in years. Richard is lousy at making it. Richard trudged behind, the emotional strain having taken much of his remaining strength. The casual way Zed was handling the fever scared him. He knew this was his old friend's way of trying not to frighten him about the seriousness of the matter. He could feel his pulse in his sore hand. Since Zed was from the Midlands, Richard had thought he would gain his compassion with the mention of the quad. Richard was relieved, if somewhat surprised, at how the two of them were suddenly so amiable. He reached up as he walked, touching the tooth for reassurance. He was, however, quite disturbed by what he now knew. Near a back corner of the house sat a table where Zed liked to take his meals in good weather. It afforded him the opportunity to keep an eye to the clouds while he ate. Zed sat them down together on a bench while he went inside and brought out carrots, berries, cheese, and apple juice, putting them on the wooden tabletop worn smooth with years of use, then sat himself on the bench opposite them. He gave Richard a mug of something brown and thick that smelled of almonds and told him to drink it slowly. His eyes came to Richard. Tell me of the trouble. Richard related how he was bitten by a vine, and told Zed about seeing the thing in the sky, seeing Kaelin at Trunt Lake, and being followed by the 4 men. He told the whole story with every detail he could remember. He knew Zed liked to have every detail, no matter how unimportant. Occasionally, Richard stopped to take a sip from the mug. Kaylin ate some carrots and berries and drank the apple juice, but she pushed away the plate with the cheese. She nodded or offered help when he couldn't remember a particular point. The only thing he left out was the story Kaylin had told him of the history of the Three Lands and about Darken Rahl taking over the Midlands. He thought it better that she tell it in her own words. At the end, Zed made him go back to the beginning, wanting to know what Richard had been doing in the hive then in the first place. When I went to my father's house after the murder, I looked in the message jar. It was about the only thing not broken. Inside was a piece of vine. For the last 3 weeks I've been looking for the vine, trying to find out what my father's last message meant. And when I found it, well, that's the thing that bit me. He was glad to be finished. His tongue felt thick. Zed bit off a chunk of carrot while thinking. What did the vine look like? It was... Wait, I still have it in my pocket. He took out the sprig and plunked it down on the table. Bags, Zed whispered. That's a snake vine. Richard felt a shock of icy cold sweep through him. He knew the name from the secret book. He hoped against hope it did not mean what he feared it did. Zed sat back. Well, the good part is now I know the root to use to cure the fever. The bad part is I have to find it. Zed asked Kaylin to tell her part, but to make it short, as there were things he must do and not much time. Richard thought about the story she had told in the Wayward Pine the night before, and wondered how she could possibly make it shorter. Darken Rahl, son of Panis Rahl, has put the 3 boxes of Orden in play, Kaylin said simply. I have come in search of the great wizard. Richard was thunderstruck. From the secret book, the Book of Counted Shadows, the book his father had had him commit to memory before they destroyed it, the line jumped into his mind. And when the 3 boxes of Orden are put into play, the snake vine shall grow. Richard's worst nightmares, everyone's worst nightmares, were coming to pass. Chapter 7. Pain and dizziness from the fever made Richard only dimly aware that his head had sunk to the table. He groaned while his mind spun with the implications of what Kaylin had told Zed, of the prophecy of the secret book of Counted Shadows come to life. Then Zed was at his side, lifting him, telling Kaylin to help get him into the house. As he walked with their help, the ground slipped this way and that, making it difficult to catch it with his feet. Then they were laying him down on a bed, covering him up. He knew they were talking, but he couldn't make sense of the words, which slurred in his mind. Darkness sucked his mind in, then there was light. He seemed to float back up, only to spiral down again. He wondered who he was and what was happening. Time passed as the room spun and rolled and tilted. He gripped the bed to keep from being flung off. Sometimes he knew where he was and tried desperately to hold on to what he knew, only to slip away again into blackness. He became aware again, realizing that time had passed, though he didn't have any idea how much. Was it dark? Maybe it was just that the curtains were pulled. Someone, he realized, was putting a cool, wet cloth on his forehead. His mother smoothed back his hair. Her touch felt comforting, soothing. He could almost make out her face. She was so good. She always took such good care of him. Until she died. He wanted to cry. She was dead. Still, she smoothed his hair. That couldn't be. It had to be someone else, but who? Then he remembered. It was Kaylin. He spoke her name. Kaylin was smoothing his hair. I am here. It came back to him, rushing back in a torrent. The murder of his father, the vine that bit him, Kaylin, the 4 men on the cliff, his brother's speech, someone waiting for him at his house, the Gar, the night wisp telling him to seek the answer or die, what Kaylin said, that the 3 boxes of Orden were in play, and his secret, the Book of Counted Shadows. He remembered how his father had taken him to the secret place in the woods, and had told him how he had saved the Book of Counted Shadows from the peril it was in from the beast that guarded it until its master could come. how he had brought it with him to Westland to keep it from those covetous hands, hands that the keeper of the book didn't know threatened. His father had told him how there was danger as long as the book existed, but he couldn't destroy the knowledge in it. He had no right. It belonged to the keeper of the book, and it must be kept safe until it could be returned. The only way to do that was to commit the book to memory and then burn it. Only in that way could the knowledge be preserved, but not stolen, as it otherwise surely would be. His father chose Richard. That it was to be Richard and not Michael was for reasons of his own. No one could know of the book, not even Michael. Only the keeper of the book, no one else. Only the keeper. He said Richard might never find the keeper, and in that case he was to pass the book on to his child, and then that child to his own, and so on for as long as was necessary. His father couldn't tell him who the keeper of the book was, as he didn't know. Richard asked how he was to know the keeper, but his father said only that he would have to find the answer himself, and not to tell anyone ever except the keeper. His father told Richard he was not to tell his own brother, or even his best friend, Zed. Richard swore on his life. His father had never once looked in the book, only Richard. Day after day, week after week, with breaks only when he traveled, his father took him to the secret place deep in the woods where he sat and watched Richard reading the book over and over. Michael was usually off with his friends and had no interest in going into the woods even if he was at home, and it wasn't uncommon for Richard not to visit Zed when his father was home, so neither had reason to know of the frequent trips to the woods. Richard would write down what he memorized and check it against the book. Each time, his father burned the papers and had him do it again. His father apologized every day for the burden he was placing on Richard. He asked for forgiveness from his son at the end of every day in the woods. Richard never resented having to learn the book. He considered it an honor to be entrusted by his father. He wrote the book from beginning to end 100 times without error before he satisfied himself that he could never forget a single word. He knew by reading it that any word left out would spell disaster. When he assured his father that it was committed to memory, they put the book back in the hiding place in the rocks and left it for 3 years. After that time, when Richard was beyond his middle teens, they returned one fall day, and his father said if Richard could write the whole book without a single mistake, they could both be satisfied it was learned perfectly, and they would burn the book. Richard wrote without hesitation from beginning to end. It was perfect. Together they built a fire, stacking on more than enough wood until the heat drove them back. His father handed him the book and told him that if he was sure to throw the book into the fire. Richard held the book of counted shadows in the crook of his arm, running his fingers over the leather cover. He held his father's trust in his arms, held the trust of everyone in his arms, and he felt the weight of the burden. He gave the book to the fire. In that moment he was no longer a child. The flames swirled around the book, embracing, caressing, consuming. Colors and forms spiraled up, and a roaring cry came forth. Strange beams of light shot skyward. Wind made their cloaks flap as the fire sucked leaves and twigs into itself, adding to the flames in heat. Phantoms appeared, spreading their arms as if being fed by the blaze, their voices racing away on the wind. The two of them stood as if turned to stone, unable to move, unable even to turn away from the sight. Searing heat turned to wind as cold as the deepest winter night, sending chills up their spines, taking their breath from them. Then the cold was gone, and the fire turned to a white light that consumed everything in its brightness, as if they were standing in the sun. Just as suddenly it was gone. In its place, silence. The fire was out. Wisps of smoke rose slowly from the blackened wood into the autumn air. The book was gone. Richard knew what he had seen. He had seen magic. Richard felt a hand resting on his shoulder and opened his eyes. It was Kaylin. In the firelight coming through the doorway, he could see she was sitting in a chair pulled close to his bed. Zed's big old coon cat was curled up sleeping in her lap. "Where's Zed?" he asked, sleepy-eyed. "He has gone to find the root you need." Her voice was soft and calming. It has been dark for hours now, but he said not to be concerned if it took him time to find the route. He said that you would go in and out of sleep, but would be safe until he returned. He said the drink he gave you before would keep you safe until he is back. Richard realized for the first time that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Her hair was tumbled down around her face and shoulders, and he wanted very much to touch it, but didn't. It was enough to feel her hand on his shoulder, to know she was there, and that he was not alone. "How do you feel?" Her voice was so soft, so gentle, that he couldn't imagine why Zed had been afraid of her. "I would rather fight another quad than another snakevine." She smiled her special smile, her private smile of sharing something with him, as she wiped his brow with the cloth. He reached up and grabbed her wrist. She stopped and looked into his eyes. "Kaelin, Zed is my friend of many years. He is like a second father to me. Promise me you won't do anything to hurt him." I could not bear it. She looked at him reassuringly. "I like him too, very much. He is a good man, just as you said. I have no desire to hurt him, only to seek his help in finding the wizard." He gripped her wrist tighter. "Promise me." "Richard, everything will be fine. He will help us." He remembered the fingers on his throat, and the look in her eyes when she thought he was trying to poison her with an apple. "Promise me." "I have already made promises to others, some of whom have given their lives. I have responsibilities to the lives of others, many others." "Promise me." She put her other hand on the side of his face. "I am sorry, Richard, I cannot." He released her wrist, turned, and closed his eyes as she took her hand from his face. He thought about the book, all that it meant, and realized he was making a selfish request. Would he trick her to save Zed, only to have him die with them? Would he doom all the others to death or slavery just to see his friend live a couple more months? Could he condemn her to death too, for nothing? He felt ashamed at his own stupidity. He had no right to ask her to make such a promise. It would be wrong for her to do so. He was glad she had not lied to him, but he knew that just because Zed had asked about the trouble they were in did not mean he would help with anything to do from across the boundary. "Kaelin, this fever is making me foolish. Please forgive me. I have never met another with your courage. I know you are trying to save us all. Zed will help us. I will see to it. Promise me only that you will wait until I am better. Give me the chance to convince him." She squeezed her hand on his shoulder. "That is a promise I can make. I know you care about your friend. I would despair if you didn't. That does not make you foolish. Rest now." He tried not to close his eyes, since when he did, everything started spinning uncontrollably. But talking had sapped his strength, and soon the blackness pulled him back in. His thoughts were once again sucked into the void. Sometimes he came partway back and wandered in troubled dreams. Sometimes he wandered in places empty even of illusion. The cat came awake, his ears perking up. Richard slept on. Sounds that only the cat could hear made him jump off Kaelin's lap, trot to the door, and sit on his haunches, waiting. Kaelin waited too, and since the cat didn't raise his fur, she stayed by Richard. A thin voice came from outside. "Cat? Cat, where have you gotten to? Well, you can just stay out here then." The door squeaked open. "There you are." The cat ran out the doorway. "Suit yourself," Zed called after him. "How is Richard?" he called to her. When he came into the room, Kaelin answered from the chair. "He came awake several times, but he is sleeping now. Did you find the route you need?" "I wouldn't be here otherwise. Did he have anything to say when he was awake?" Kaelin smiled up at the old man. "Just that he was worried about you." He turned and went back into the front room, grumbling. "Not without good reason." Sitting at the table, he peeled the roots, cut them into thin wafers, put the wafers into a pot with some water, and then hung the pot on the crane over the fire. He threw the peels and then 2 sticks of wood into the fire before going to the cupboard and pulling down a number of different-sized jars. Without hesitation, he selected first one jar, then another, pouring different-colored powders into a black stone mortar. With a white pestle, he ground the reds, blues, yellows, browns, and greens together until it was all the color of dry mud. After licking the end of his finger, he dipped it in the mortar to collect a sample. He put the finger to his tongue for a taste and lifted an eyebrow while he smacked his lips and pondered. At last he smiled and nodded in satisfaction. He poured the powder into the pot, blending it in with a spoon from a hook at the side of the fireplace. He stirred slowly while watching the concoction bubble. For nearly 2 hours he stirred and watched. When at last he determined that the work was done, he plunked the pot on the table to cool. Zed collected a bowl and cloth, and after a while called to Kalin to come help him. She came quickly to his side, and he instructed her how to hold the cloth over the bowl while he poured the mixture through. He spun his finger around in the air. "Now, twist the cloth around and around to squeeze the liquid out. When it's all out, throw the cloth and its contents in the fire." She looked at him, puzzled. Zed lifted an eyebrow. "The part left in there is poison. Richard should be awake any time now. Then we give him the liquid in the bowl. You keep squeezing. I will check on him." Zed went into the bedroom, bent over Richard, and found him to be deeply unconscious. He turned and saw that Kalin's back was to him as she worked at her task. He bent over, placing a middle finger to Richard's forehead. Richard's eyes snapped open. "Dear one," Zed called into the other room, "we are in luck. He has just come awake. Bring the bowl." Richard blinked. "Zed, are you all right? Is everything all right?" Yes, everything is fine." Kalin came in holding the bowl carefully, trying not to spill any. Zed helped Richard sit up so he could drink. When he finished, Zed helped him to lie back down. "That will make you sleep and break the fever. The next time you awake, you will be well. You have my word. So worry no more as you rest." "Thank you, Zed." Richard was asleep before he could say more. Zed left and then returned with a tin plate, insisting that Kalin take the chair. "The thorn will not be able to stand the root," he explained. "It will have to leave his body." He put the plate under Richard's hand and sat down on the edge of the bed to wait. They both listened to Richard's deep breathing and the crackling of the fire from the other room. Otherwise, the house was still. It was Zed who broke the silence first. "It is dangerous for a confessor to travel alone, dear one. Where is your wizard?" She looked up at him with tired eyes. "My wizard sold his services to a queen." Zed gave a disapproving scowl. "He abandoned his responsibilities to the confessors? What is his name?" "Giller." "Giller." He repeated the name with a sour expression, then leaned toward her a bit. "So why did another not come with you?" She gave him a hard look. "Because they are all dead at their own hands. Before they died, they all gathered and cast a web to see me safely through the boundary with the guidance of a night wisp." Zed stood at this news. Sadness and concern etched his face as he rubbed his chin. "You knew the wizards?" she asked. Yes. I lived in the Midlands a long time." "And the Great One? You know him also?" Zed smiled, rearranged his robes, and seated himself again. "You are persistent, dear one. Yes, I knew the old wizard once, but even if you could find him, I don't think he would have anything to do with this business. He would not be inclined to help the Midlands." Kalin leaned forward, taking his hand in hers. Her voice was soft but intense. "Zed, there are many people who disapprove of the High Council of the Midlands and its greed. They wish it were not so, but they are just common people who have no say. They only wish to live their lives in peace. Darken Rahl has taken the food that was stored for the coming winter and given it to the army. They waste it, or let it rot, or sell it back to the people they stole it from. Already there is hunger. This winter there will be death." Fire has been outlawed. People are cold. Rahl says it is all the great wizard's fault for not coming forward to be put on trial as an enemy of the people. He says the wizard has brought this on them, that he is to blame. He doesn't explain how this could be, but many believe it anyway. Many believe everything Rahl says, even though what they see with their own eyes should be enough to tell them otherwise. The wizards were under constant threat, and forbidden by edict from using magic. They knew that sooner or later they would be used against the people. They may have made mistakes in the past and disappointed their teacher, but the most important thing they were taught was to be protectors of the people and in no way to bring them harm. As their most loving act for the people, they gave their lives to stop Darken Rahl. I think their teacher would have been proud. But this is not about just the Midlands. The boundary between Dahara and the Midlands is down. The boundary between the Midlands and Westland is failing, and soon it too will be down. The people of Westland will be taken by the very thing they fear most, magic. Terrible, frightening magic like none they have ever imagined. Zed showed no emotion, offered no objection or opinion, only listened. He continued to allow her to hold his hands. All I have said, the great wizard could have an argument for, but the fact that Darken Rahl has put the 3 boxes of Orden into play is something altogether different. If he succeeds, then on the first day of winter it will be too late for anyone. That includes the wizard. Rahl already searches for him. It is personal vengeance he seeks. Many have died because they could not offer his name. When Rahl opens the correct box, though, he will have unchallenged power over all living things, and then the wizard will be his. He can hide in Westland all he wants, but come the first day of winter his hiding is over. Darken Rahl will have him. There was bitterness in her expression. Zed, Darken Rahl has used quads to kill all the other confessors. I found my sister after they were finished with her. She died in my arms. With all the others dead, that leaves only me. The wizards knew their teacher did not want to help, so they sent me as the last hope. If he is too foolish to see that in helping us he helps himself, then I must use my power against him to make him help. Zed raised an eyebrow. And what is one dried-up old wizard to do against the power of this Darken Rahl? He was now holding her hands in his. He must appoint a seeker. What? Zed jumped to his feet. Dear one, you don't know what you are talking about. Confused, Kaelin leaned back a little. What do you mean? Seekers appoint themselves. The wizard just sort of recognizes what has happened and makes it official. I don't understand. I thought the wizard picked the person, the right person. Zed sat back down, rubbing his chin. Well, that's true in a sense, but backwards. A true seeker, one who can make a difference, must show himself to be a seeker. The wizard doesn't point to someone and say, Here is the sword of truth, you will be the seeker. He doesn't really have a choice in the matter. It isn't something you can train someone for. One should simply be a seeker and show himself to be so by his actions. A wizard must watch a person for years to be sure. A seeker doesn't have to be the smartest person, but he has to be the right person. He has to have the right qualities within himself. A true seeker is a rare person. The seeker is a balance point of power. The council made the appointment a political bone to be thrown to one of the sniveling dogs at their feet. It was a sought-after post because of the power a seeker wields. But the council didn't understand. It wasn't the post that brought the power to the person. It was the person that brought the power to the post. He edged closer to her. Kaelin, you were born after the council took this power upon itself, so you may have seen a seeker when you were young. But in those days they were pretend seekers. You have never seen the real thing. His eyes got round in the telling, his voice low and full of passion. I have seen a true seeker make a king quake in his boots with the asking of a single question. When a real seeker draws the sword of truth, he held his hands up and rolled his eyes in delight. Righteous anger can be an extraordinary thing to behold. Kaelin smiled at his excitement. It can make the good tremble with joy, and the wicked shiver in fear. The smile left his face. But people rarely believe the truth when they see it, and less so when they don't want to. And that makes the position of seeker a dangerous one. He is an obstacle to those who would subvert power. He draws lightning from many sides. Most often he stands alone, and frequently not long.
I know the feeling well, she said, with only the hint of a smile.
Zed leaned closer. Against Darken Rahl, I doubt even a true seeker would last long. And then what? She took up his hands again. Zed, we must try. It is our only chance. If we don't take it, we have none. He sat up, pulling away from her. Any person the wizard picks would not know the Midlands. He would have no chance there. It would be a sentence of quick death. That is the other reason I was sent, to be his guide, and stand with him to offer my life if need be to help protect him. Confessors spend their life traveling the lands. I have been almost everywhere in the Midlands. A confessor is trained from birth in languages. She has to be, because she never knows where she will be called. I speak every major language and most of the minor ones. And as far as drawing lightning, a confessor draws her fair share. If we were easy to kill, Rahl would not need to send quads to get the job done. And many of them have died in the doing. I can help protect the Seeker, if need be with my own life. What you propose not only would put someone's life at terrible risk, as Seeker, dear one, but yours also. She raised an eyebrow. I am hunted now. If you have a better way, put words to it. Before Zed could answer, Richard moaned. The old man looked over at him and then rose. It is time. Kaelin stood up next to him as he lifted Richard's arm by the wrist, holding the wounded hand over the tin plate. Blood dripped onto the plate with soft, hollow sounds. The thorn fell out with a small, wet splash. Kaelin reached for it. Zed grabbed her wrist. Don't do that, dear one. Now that it has been expelled from its host, it will be anxious to have a new one. Watch.
She took her hand back as he put his bony finger on the plate several inches from the thorn.
It wiggled its way toward the finger, leaving a thin trail of blood. He took his finger away and handed her the plate. Hold it from underneath and take it to the hearth. Put it on the fire face down and leave it there.
While she did as Zed requested, he cleaned the wound and applied a salve.
When Kaelin returned, he held Richard's hand while she wrapped it. Zed watched her hands as she worked. Why have you not told him what you are, that you are a confessor? There was a hard edge to his voice. Hers came back in kind. Because of the way you reacted when you recognized me as a confessor. She paused, and the harshness left her voice. Somehow we have become friends. I am inexperienced in that, but I am very experienced at being a confessor. I have seen reactions like yours all my life. When I leave with the Seeker, I will tell him. Until then, I would very much like to have his friendship. Is that too much to ask, to be allowed the simple human pleasure of a friend? The friendship will end soon enough when I tell him. When she finished, Zed put a finger under her chin, raising her face to his gentle smile. When I first saw you, I reacted foolishly, mostly to the surprise of seeing a confessor. I had not expected ever to see one again. I quit the Midlands to be free of the magic. You were an intrusion into my solitude. I apologize for my reaction, and for making you feel unwelcome. I hope I have made it up to you. I am one who has respect for the confessors, perhaps more than you will ever know. You are a good woman, and you are welcome in my house. Kalin looked into his eyes a long moment. "Thank you, Zedicus Zul'Zarander." Zed's expression turned more dangerous than hers had when they had first met. She stood frozen with his finger still under her chin, afraid to move, her eyes wide. "Know this, though, Mother Confessor." His voice was only one step above a whisper, and deadly. "This boy has been my friend a good long time. If you touch him with your power, or if you choose him, you will answer to me, and you would not like that. Do you understand?" She swallowed hard and managed to give a weak nod. "Yes." "Good." The danger left his face, leaving calm again in its place. He removed his finger from under her chin and began to turn to Richard. Kalin let her breath out, and, not willing to be intimidated, grabbed his arm, turning him back to her. "Zed, I would not do that to him. Not because of what you said, but because I care for him. I want you to understand that." They faced off, a long while, each measuring the other. Zed's impish smile returned as disarming as ever. "If offered a choice, dear one, that is the way I would prefer it." She relaxed, satisfied at having made her point, and gave him a quick hug that was returned earnestly. "There is one thing you have left unspoken. You have not asked for my help in finding the wizard." "No, and for now I won't. Richard fears what I would do if you were to say no. I promised I would not ask until he has a chance to ask you first. I gave him my word." Zed put a bony finger to his chin. "How interesting." He laid his hand on her shoulder conspiratorially and changed the subject. "You know, dear one, you might make a good seeker yourself." "Me? A woman can be seeker?" He lifted an eyebrow. "Of course, some of the best seekers have been women." "I already have an impossible job," she frowned. "I don't need two." Zed chuckled, his eyes sparkling. "Perhaps you are right. Now it's very late, dear one. Go to my bed in the next room and get yourself some needed sleep. I will sit with Richard." "No." She shook her head and plopped down in the chair. "I don't want to leave him for now." Zed shrugged. "As you wish." He walked behind her and patted her shoulder reassuringly. "As you wish." He gently reached up and put a middle finger to each of her temples, rubbing in little circles. She moaned softly as her eyes closed. "Sleep, dear one," he whispered. "Sleep." She folded her arms down onto the edge of the bed, and her head sank onto her arms. She was deeply asleep. After he put a blanket over her, Zed went to the front room and pulled open the door, looking out into the night. "Cat! Come here, I want you!" The cat came running in and rubbed himself against Zed's legs, swishing his tail up. Zed bent down and scratched him behind the ears. "Go in and sleep on the young woman's lap. Keep her warm." The cat padded off to the bedroom as the old man stepped out into the cold night air.
The wind whipped Zed's robes as he walked the narrow path through the tall grass. The clouds were thin, illuminated by the moon, which gave enough light to see by, even though he didn't need it. He had walked the same route thousands of times. "Nothing is ever easy," he muttered as he went. Near a stand of trees, he stopped, listening. Slowly he turned about, peering into the shadows, watching the branches bend and sway in the breeze, testing the air with his nose. He searched for an alien movement. A fly bit his neck. He swatted it angrily, picked the offender off his neck, and glared at it. "Blood fly. Bags, I thought as much," he complained. From the brush nearby, something came toward him in a terrible rush. Wings and fur and teeth came charging. Hands on his hips, Zed waited. Just before it was on him, he held up a hand, bringing the short-tailed gar to a lurching halt. It was half again as tall as he, full-grown, and twice as fierce as a long-tailed gar. The beast growled and blinked, its great muscles flexing as it fought against the force that kept it from reaching out and grabbing the old man. It was furious that it had not yet killed him. Zed reached up and with a crooked finger beckoned it to lean closer. The gar, panting in rage, bent toward him.
Zed jammed his finger hard under its chin. "What is your name?" he hissed. The beast grunted twice and made a sound from deep in its throat. Zed gave a nod. "I will remember it. Tell me, do you wish to live or to die?" The Gar struggled to back away but was unable to. "Good. Then you will do exactly as I say. Somewhere between here and Dahara, a quad comes this way. Hunt them and kill them. When you have done so, go back to Dahara to where you came from. Do these things and I will let you live. But I will remember your name, and if you fail to kill the quad or ever come back after your task is done, I will kill you and feed you to your flies. Do you agree to my terms?" The Gar grunted at acknowledgement. "Good. Then begone." Zed removed his finger from under the Gar's chin. Scrambling to get away, the beast flapped its wings frantically, beating down the grass as it stumbled along. At last, the Gar was airborne. Zed watched it as it circled, searching for the quad. As the hunt moved steadily east, the circles seemed to get smaller until the old man could no longer see the beast. Only then did he continue on to the top of the hill. Standing next to his cloud rock, Zed pointed down at it and began turning his bony finger in a circle as if stirring a stew. The massive rock grated against the ground as it tried to revolve with the movement of Zed's finger. The rock shuddered, trying to rotate its own weight. Popping and snapping, it fractured, sending hairline cracks shooting across its surface. Its trembling bulk struggled against the force being applied. The granular structure of the stone began to soften. Unable to maintain its state any longer, the texture of the rock liquefied enough to allow its mass to rotate with the movement of the finger above it. Gradually, the speed of Zed's stirring increased until light erupted from the rotating liquid rock. The light built in intensity with the speed of Zed's hand. As colors and sparkles of light spun, shadows and forms came into the center of the light and vanished as the fog of brightness increased. Light threatened to ignite the air about him. A dull roar, like the sound of wind rushing through a fissure, came forth. The smells of autumn changed to winter clarity, then spring's new plowed ground, summer's flowers, and back to autumn again. Clean, pure illumination chased the colors and sparkles away. The rock abruptly solidified, and Zed stepped atop it into the light. The brightness faded to a faint glow that swirled like smoke. Before him stood two apparitions, mere shadows of form. Where sharpness should have been, their shapes softened like a dim memory. Yet they were still recognizable, and the sight of them brought a quickness to Zed's heart. His mother's voice came hollow and distant. "What troubles you, son? Why have you called us after so many years?" Her arms stretched out to him. Zed's arms reached out, but could not touch her. "I am troubled by what the Mother Confessor tells me." "She speaks the truth." He closed his eyes and nodded as his arms lowered with hers. "It's true, then. All my students, save Giller, are dead." "You are the only one left to protect the Mother Confessor." She drifted closer. "You must appoint the Seeker." "The High Council sowed these seeds," he protested, frowning. "Now you want me to help? They turned my advice away. Let them live and die by their own greed." Zed's father floated closer. "My son, why were you angry with your students?" Zed scowled. "Because they put themselves before their duty to help their people." "I see. And how is this different from what you do now?" The echo of his voice hung in the air. Zed's fists tightened. "My help was offered, but turned away." "And when has it not been so, that there would be those who were blind or foolish or greedy? Would you let them have their way over you so easily? Would you let them so simply prevent you from helping those who would be helped? Your abandonment of the people may have a reason that seems just to you, unlike the actions of your students, but the results are the same. In the end, they saw their mistake and did the right things, the things you taught them.
Learn from your students, son. Zedicus, his mother said, would you let Richard die too, and all the other innocents? Appoint the Seeker?
He's too young.
She shook her head with a gentle smile. He will not get the chance to grow older.
He has not passed my final test.
Darken Rahl hunts Richard. The cloud that shadows him was sent by Rahl to track him. The snake vine was put in the jar by Darken Rahl, in the expectation that Richard would search for it and it would bite him. The snake vine wasn't meant to kill. Rahl sought to have him put to sleep by the fever until he could come for him. Her form drifted closer, her voice becoming more loving. You know in your heart you have been watching him, hoping he would show himself to be the one.
To what avail?
Zed closed his eyes, his chin sinking to his chest.
Darken Rahl has the 3 boxes of Orden.
No, his father said. He has only 2. He still seeks the 3rd. Zed's eyes snapped open. His head jerked up.
What? He doesn't have them all?
No, his mother said. But he soon will.
And the book. Surely he must have the Book of Counted Shadows?
No, he searches for it. Zed put a finger to his chin, thinking.
Then there's a chance, he whispered. What sort of fool would put the boxes of Orden in play before he had all 3 and the book?
His mother's features sharpened into a look of ice. A very dangerous one. He travels the underworld. Zed stiffened, and his breath caught in his throat. His mother's eyes seemed to pierce him. That is how he was able to cross the boundary and recover the 1st box, by traveling the underworld. That is how he was able to begin the undoing of the boundary from within the underworld. He commands some in it, more with his every coming. If you choose to help, be warned. Do not go through the boundary or send the Seeker through. Rahl expects it. If you enter, he will have you. The Mother Confessor came through only because he did not expect it. He will not make the same mistake again.
But then how am I to get us to the Midlands? I can't help if I can't get to the Midlands.
Zed's voice was tense with frustration. We're sorry, but we don't know. We believe there must be a way, but it is not known to us. That is why you must appoint the Seeker. If he is the right one, he will find a way. Their forms began to shimmer, to fade.
Wait, I must have the answers to my questions. Please, don't leave me.
We're sorry, it is not our choice. We are called back behind the veil.
Why is Rahl after Richard? Please help me.
His father's voice was weak and distant. We don't know. You must search for the answers yourself. We have trained you well. You are more talented than we ever were. Use what you were taught and what you feel. We love you, son. Until this is settled one way or the other, we cannot come to you again. With Orden in play, coming again could tear the veil. His mother kissed her hand and held it out to him as he did the same in return. And then they were gone. Zedicus Zul'Zorander, the great and honorable wizard, stood alone on the wizard's rock his father had given him and stared out into the night, thinking wizard's thoughts.
Nothing is ever easy, he whispered.
Chapter 8. Richard came awake with a start. Warm midday light filled the room, and the wonderful tangy aroma of spice soup filled his lungs. He was in his room at Zed's house. He looked up at the familiar knots in the wood walls, and the faces he always made them into in his mind stared back. The door to the front room stood shut. A chair waited next to the bed, empty. He sat up, pushing the covers down, and saw that he still wore his dirty clothes. He felt for the tooth under his shirt and sighed in relief when he found it still there, safe. A short stick held the window open a few inches, letting in fresh air and the sound of Kalen's laughter. Zed must be telling stories, he thought. Richard looked at his left hand. It was wrapped, but no longer sore, when he flexed his fingers. His head didn't hurt any more either. In fact, he felt wonderful. Hungry, but wonderful. He amended that to dirty and filthy clothes and hungry, but wonderful. A tub of bathwater, soap, and clean towels sat in the center of the small room. A clean outfit of his forest garb was folded and stacked neatly on the chair. The bathwater looked deliciously inviting. He dipped his hand in and found the water warm. Zed must have known when he would wake. Knowing Zed as well as he did, that didn't surprise him. Richard undressed and slipped into the welcoming water. The soap smelled almost as good to him as the soup. He liked to stay in the tub for a good long soak, but he felt too wide awake for soaking and was eager to be outside with the other two. Unwrapping the hand, he was surprised to find how much it had healed overnight. When he came out, Kaylin and Zed were sitting at the table waiting for him. Kaylin's dress was freshly washed, he noticed, and she looked bathed, too. Her hair was clean and glistened in the sunlight. Green eyes sparkled up at him. A big bowl of soup waited for him next to her at the table, along with cheese and fresh bread. "I wouldn't have expected to have slept until noon," he said, swinging his leg over the bench. They both laughed. Richard eyed them suspiciously. Kaylin straightened her face. "This is the second noon you have slept to, Richard." "Yes," Zed added. "You slept right through the first. How do you feel? How is your hand?" "I'm fine. Thank you, Zed, for helping me. Thank you both." He opened and closed his fingers to show them the improvement. "The hand feels much better, except it itches." "My mother always said that if it itched, that meant it was getting better." Richard grinned at her. "Mine, too." He fished a piece of potato and a mushroom into his spoon and tasted it. "It's as good as mine," he said to her earnestly. She sat crosswise on the bench, facing toward him, her elbow resting on the table with the side of her jaw nestled in the heel of her hand. She gave him a knowing smile. "Zed tells it differently." Richard cast a reproachful eye at Zed, who looked up at the sky in an exaggerated manner. "Does he now? I will have to remind him of that the next time he is begging me to make it for him." "Frankly," she said in a low voice, but not low enough that Zed couldn't hear, "from what I've seen, I think he would eat dirt if someone else dished it up for him." Richard laughed. "I see you've gotten to know him well." "I tell you, Richard," the old man said, pointing a bony finger, not about to let them get the best of him, "she could make dirt taste good. You would do well to take lessons from her." Richard broke off a piece of bread and dunked it in the soup. He knew the joking was a release for the tension he sensed, a way to pass the time while they both waited for him to finish. Kaylin had given Richard her word that she would wait for him to ask Zed's help. It was apparent that she had kept her word. And Zed's way was to play ignorant and innocent and wait for you to ask something first so he could better judge what you already knew. This day, Richard could not allow any of his games. This day, things were different. "There is one thing I don't trust about her, though." Zed's tone was dark, menacing. Richard froze in mid-chew. He swallowed and waited, not daring to look at either of them, while the other paused. "She doesn't like cheese. I don't think I could ever trust anyone who doesn't like cheese. It's not natural." Richard relaxed. Zed was just twiddling with his mind, as he always called it. His old friend seemed to have a knack for catching him off guard, and he delighted in it. Richard stole a glance at Zed to see him sitting there with an innocent smile on his face. Richard smiled, too, in spite of himself. While he relished the bowl of soup, Zed nibbled on a piece of cheese to make his point. Kaylin nibbled on a piece of bread to make hers. The bread tasted delicious. Kaylin was pleased when he pointed it out. As Richard neared the end of his meal, he decided it was time to change the tone of things back to business. "The next quad, has there been any sign?" "No. I was worried, but Zed did a cloud reading for me and said it appeared they must have run into trouble of some kind, since they were nowhere to be found." He gave Zed a sideways glance. "Is that true?" "True as toasted toads." Zed had used the expression since Richard was young, to win him over with humor and let him know he could always trust the old man to be truthful with him above all else. Richard wondered what sort of trouble a quad could run into. For better or worse, he had succeeded in changing the mood at the table. He felt Kaylin's impatience for him to get on with it, And he sensed impatience in Zed, too. Kaelin turned back to the table and put both hands in her lap, waiting. Richard feared that if he didn't handle things properly, she would do whatever it was she was here to do, and he would have no control over it. Richard finished his meal and pushed the bowl away with his thumbs, at the same time meeting Zed's eyes. His friend's humor was gone, but otherwise he showed nothing of what he was thinking. He simply waited. It was Richard's turn now, and once he began, there could be no going back. Zed, my friend, we need your help to stop Darken Rahl. I know. You want me to find the wizard for you? No, that won't be necessary. I have already found him. Richard felt Kaelin's questioning eyes on him, but he continued to fix his gaze on Zed. You are the great wizard. Kaelin began to rise from the bench. Without taking his eyes from Zed, Richard reached under the table and clutched her forearm, forcing her to sit back down. Still, Zed showed no emotion. His voice came even and soft. And what makes you think this, Richard? Richard took a deep breath, letting it out slowly as he put his hands on the table, intertwining his fingers. He watched his hands as he spoke. When Kaelin first told me about the history of the Three Lands, she said the council had taken actions that made the death of the wizard's wife and daughter at the hands of a quad stand for nothing. And as punishment, the wizard did the worst thing possible to them. He left them to suffer the consequences of their own actions. That sounded like the very thing you would do, but I couldn't be sure then. I had to find a way to know. When you first saw Kaelin and were angry that she had come here from the Midlands, I told you she had been attacked by a quad. I watched your eyes. They told me I was right. Only someone who had suffered a loss like yours would have had that look in his eyes. And you changed your attitude toward her after I told you, completely. Only someone who had known the terror personally would have that kind of empathy. But still, I didn't trust my instinct. I waited. He looked up at Zed and held the other's gaze while he spoke. Your biggest mistake was when you told Kaelin she was safe here. You would not lie, especially about something like that. And you know what a quad is. How could an old man make it safe here against a quad without magic? He couldn't, but one old wizard could. The next quad is nowhere to be found. You said so yourself. They ran into some trouble. I think they ran into some wizard trouble. You were as good as your word. You always are. Richard's voice turned gentler. I have always known in 1,000 little ways that you were more than you claimed to be, that you were a special person. I have always been honored to have you as my friend, and I know that as my friend you would do anything, anything you must, to help me if my life were in danger, just as I would do anything for you. I trust you with my life, and it is now in your hands. Richard hated closing the trap in this fashion, but all their lives were at risk. There could be no games. Zed put his hands on the table and leaned forward. I have never before been this proud of you, Richard. His eyes told that he meant it. You got it all right. He stood and came around the table. When Richard stood, they hugged. I have also never been this sad